The jungle air hung heavy and damp. The scent of decaying vegetation mixed with the sweet aroma of unknown night-blooming flowers. Above, the sky blazed with a million stars, unseen in the light-polluted cities. But down here, beneath the dense canopy of leaves and vines, only slivers of starlight pierced the darkness. A group of men moved like ghosts through the undergrowth. Their faces, camouflaged with mud and fatigue, were grim masks in the darkness. Their leader, Captain Rex, paused, his hand raised. The men froze, their eyes scanning the shadows, their senses on high alert. The mission was critical. Their country, a small nation on the brink of war, was depending on them. Failure was not an option. Not tonight. Not ever. Rex lowered his hand, a silent signal to proceed. He moved with the grace of a jungle cat, his every sense alert to the unseen dangers lurking in the shadows. He could hear the chirping of insects, the rustle of leaves, the distant screech of a nocturnal predator. The men followed in single file, their footsteps muffled by the damp earth. They communicated in whispers, their words barely audible above the cacophony of the jungle night. Each man carried the weight of their mission, the knowledge that their lives and the fate of their nation hung in the balance. The air was thick with anticipation. The threat of the enemy hung over them like a suffocating blanket. They were deep in enemy territory, surrounded by danger on all sides. Rex stopped at the base of a towering kapok tree, its massive roots forming a natural barrier. He turned to his men, his voice a low growl.
This is it. Set up camp. We move at first light.
The men sprang into action, their movements practiced and efficient. They unloaded their packs, setting up tents and camouflaging them with branches and leaves. 2 men went to work setting up a makeshift communication system, their faces illuminated by the faint glow of their instruments. Another 2 began preparing a simple meal of rations and water purified from a nearby stream. Rex watched them, his mind racing. He knew they were vulnerable here, exposed in the heart of enemy territory. But they had a job to do, and they would do it no matter the cost. A rustle in the undergrowth caught Rex's attention. He whirled around, his hand instinctively reaching for the weapon strapped to his thigh. A pair of luminous eyes stared back at him from the darkness. A collective sigh of relief swept through the camp as a small spotted fawn stumbled out of the bushes. It was just a baby, its eyes wide and innocent, its coat still speckled with white. It approached the men cautiously, sniffing the air with its wet nose. For a moment, the tension eased. The men exchanged weary smiles, the sight of the harmless creature a welcome distraction from the ever-present danger. Rex knelt down, extending a hand towards the fawn. It hesitated for a moment before taking a tentative step closer, nuzzling his palm. He scratched it gently behind the ears, feeling a moment of unexpected peace. But the moment was fleeting. The weight of his responsibility pressed down on him, heavy and unrelenting. The mission, the war, the lives that hung in the balance. He couldn't afford to be distracted, not even by something as innocent as a lost fawn. He gently nudged the fawn back towards the undergrowth.
Go on, little one. Get somewhere safe.
The fawn disappeared back into the darkness, leaving Rex to face the shadows of his mission. The night deepened. The men ate their meager rations in silence, their faces lit by the flickering flames of their campfire. Rex kept watch, his senses on high alert. The jungle was never truly silent. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig sent a jolt of adrenaline through his veins. Suddenly a figure dropped from the canopy above, landing silently behind Rex. Before he could react, a rough hand clamped over his mouth, stifling his cry. A cold, metallic object pressed against his temple. A voice whispered in his ear, harsh and guttural, "Don't move. Make a sound and you die." Rex's blood ran cold. They had been compromised, but how? He had chosen this location himself, carefully scouting it for any signs of enemy presence. The figure dragged Rex through the undergrowth, his captors moving with a speed and agility that spoke of years of training. They stopped in a small clearing, illuminated by the pale glow of the moon. Bound and disarmed, Rex looked up into the face of his captor. He was a man of indeterminate age, his face a mask of hard lines and cold indifference. He wore the uniform of the enemy army, his eyes as sharp and dangerous as the knife he held in his hand.
"Captain Rex," he said, his voice devoid of inflection. "We've been expecting you."
Rex met his gaze with defiance.
Who are you? He spat, struggling against his bonds.
The man smiled, a slow, cruel stretching of his lips.
"They call me Colonel Viper," he said, "and you, Captain, are about to become a very valuable asset."
Miles away, in the sterile environment of a high-security war room, a group of men and women watched the events unfold on a large monitor. Their faces, etched with worry and fatigue, were illuminated by the harsh glare of the screen.
"We've lost contact with Rex," a young lieutenant announced, his voice tight with tension. "He's off the grid."
The president, a woman with steely grey eyes and a face weathered by years of leadership, slammed her fist on the table.
"Find him!" she commanded, her voice shaking with barely suppressed fury. "Find him before it's too late!"
Back in the jungle, Colonel Viper pressed his advantage.
Tell your men to stand down. Tell them to surrender their weapons and return to their base, or you will die.
Rex spat blood onto the jungle floor.
Never, he growled. His voice was hoarse, but his eyes burned with unwavering defiance.
Viper raised his eyebrow, a flicker of amusement crossing his features. Suddenly, a deafening explosion rocked the clearing. The ground trembled beneath their feet, the air thick with the smell of smoke and cordite. Viper's head snapped towards the sound, his expression a mask of rage and disbelief.
What have you done? He snarled, his voice laced with venomous fury.
Rex simply smiled, a slow, dangerous grin spreading across his bloodied face. In the distance, the jungle echoed with the sound of gunfire. His men. They were here.
I may be your prisoner, Viper, Rex said, his voice low and steady. But I am still a soldier of the Lunar Guard. And this fire, it still burns.